Anybody who's listened to this podcast before, Mike, knows that from time to time, I will sing. So welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Hashtag welcome back, Cotter.
Thank goodness you didn't actually bastardize the vocal quality of John Sebastian, who sings welcome back. Don't do it.
I would never. Good. I have a face for radio and a voice for that, and not on the singing side. So I'll try to eliminate as much singing as I can for this year's podcast. But officially, here we are. We're back.
It's interesting that you start with a reference to music, because it's interesting how many times music finds its way into the stories of the game that we intend to share during these podcasts, as we're kind of filling gaps between now and whenever the hell it is we get to go back to a hockey rink.
Oh, makes sense, right? Professional athletes want to be musicians and rock stars want to be professional athletes. So here we are. The music blares out when the whistle hits during a hockey game, and it's blaring in the dressing room beforehand and normally after a win as well. So it works out that it goes hand in hand, and we don't have to look too far than our guest this week on the podcast for a love of music.
Yeah, and a love of so many things, including a deep love and passion for the Ontario Hockey League. And that's really what we're hoping to share through what we're calling these stories in the Ontario Hockey League. Because, and look, I'm going to admit this right now, and anybody that knows me and has followed us doing games for any length of time, Chris, probably knows that, like, I kind of geek out a little bit over the league. I've said many a time it in my world, and maybe it's because we get so immersed in it over 68 games, but it's taken the place of the National Hockey League. I'm not saying it's, better quality-wise necessarily, but it's my first love when it comes to hockey is the Ontario Hockey League. And I'm not sure that all of its stories get told at all. I was going to say often enough, but I'm not sure they get told at all. And there are a lot of great stories from this league. There are a lot of great characters who have come through this league, and hopefully we'll be able to use this time and the advantages of technology to share as many of those stories as we can to enhance the experience and the enjoyment of the game for the fans of it today.
The nice part is about this league is that the majority of people, I shouldn't say maybe majority, there are a lot of people around this league that stay in this league and have been around for years and decades, and have seen people come and go and have seen a lot of things. So I think and those stories sometimes just stay around the OHL loop. They don't get spread out too far. It's people in one conference telling the person in another conference or in a different city stories from back in the day. But I think it is on us to get some of those stories out to our listeners. And there are some absolute beauties out there.
Well, and the thing too is, like, the managers and the coaches and the scouts who may have known the players that, of course, played in the OHL, and then we've all watched win Stanley Cups in the National Hockey League, as an example. So you and I get the opportunity, and we've talked about this on past podcasts. Our whole intention was to kind of take you with us on the road through a season. But we are privy to so many and I'm not trying to make it sound like all glamorous and how cool we are, but really, like, we get involved in some conversations sometimes in media rooms that you wish you had more time for, or you're like, you know what, we got to bring this out and share this story and so many others like you just talked about, because I think the fans would love this experience.
How many times during a season in 34 road games, or even the 34 in the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium, do you and I just look at each other and go, we got to get them on the podcast?
Exactly.
We got to get them on the podcast all the time.
Well, and the guy we're going to talk to today is definitely one of those stories. I could tell several about Jeff Twohey. I'll just drop the name now. Who might, and this is the thing, might not be a very well-known name to every fan in the Ontario Hockey League, particularly Western Conference, because he spent 3 decades with the Peterborough Petes. But this guy has touched so many lives, and he has got so many stories from the game that I just think it's, like I said, is going to enhance the enjoyment of the game for the fans of the game today. And if there's a story that you're interested in, or a person you're interested in hearing more from, shoot me an email, mike@570news.com. It's really easy, and Poper and I will get to work on tracking them down if we don't already have info, and we'll try to get that story onto the podcast because, like we said, the stories are many and they're very, very interesting.
Or farwellandpope@gmail.com as well. You
Nobody
can hit
checked
us
that.
up.
Do you check that?
I check it, yeah. Oh,
okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. We can do that.
Sorry.
farwellandpope@gmail.com. Let us know what you want to hear. Make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast if you're a fan, and you can give us 1 star if you're not.
Don't give us 1 star. We were
Please
sensitive.
don't.
Minimum rating is 2 stars. I'm calling it right now.
All right, that's fair.
1 for each of us. That's
You mentioned Jeff. He may not be well known around, especially the western side of the Ontario Hockey League or the casual fan, but this guy's been around for over 30 years in the league and has seen some of the biggest names in the world come through this league. So it was great to catch up with Jeff Twohey.
Well, I don't know that the stories get much better than the one we're going to tell, but the great thing about the story we're about to tell is that it comes from a storyteller. Jeff Twohey joins us on this. And Jeff, I say it that way because the idea for this entire podcast was born from the last time we ran into each other in the media room in Kingston. And you were doing some of your own podcasting and you just started talking about stories. And you even said, I just got one more if you got time before you go on the air. But you're always so full of these stories and you're always so full of energy for this game, even after about 4 decades in it. I don't mean to age you, but yeah, where does your passion where does your passion for the Ontario Hockey League still come to this day?
You know what, Mike? Well, first of all, Mike, Chris, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So you know me, anytime we're going to talk hockey, I'm always looking forward to it. But you know what? I was in the league for a long time, and when I was a kid, I loved the league. I used to, well, let's go back a little bit. My whole interest in the OHL, there's a Kitchener connection here, and I might have told you, Mike, that you know, I grew up around Dave and Don Maloney, and you know, both played for the Kitchener Rangers, but they're from Lindsay originally, where I grew up, and their parents and my parents were best friends. So the first OHL game I ever saw was the Kitchener Rangers in Peterborough against the Petes, and that was to go and see Dave Maloney play, and then, you know, Don played, and so, you know, from the first time I saw it as a young kid, I loved the OHL. I followed it. I, you know, aspired to get there as a player, but you know, wasn't good enough. I got hurt at the end, but probably wasn't good enough anyways. And you know, when that didn't work out, obviously I set my sights on finding a way to get there. But I think I realized I had to learn from the ground up. So I started in Tier 2 and with the Aurora Tigers as a scout when I was in high school. And as I've probably told you, when you do that stuff, they don't pay us. So you're running around trying to find players at the Tier 2 level, but met a lot of people. And then when I was in university, I got an opportunity to start with the Petes. I was scouting for them up there, and then, you know, just really never left them for 30 years. So the passion goes way back, and it's still there to this day. I mean, I still get excited when I go to a Petes game. Even though I'm not connected there at all, but just to watch the OHL, watch the young players develop, and it still excites me. And so hopefully that never leaves.
Did you ever think when you were a trainer that you would eventually become the general manager of that hockey club?
That was always the goal, Chris. Well, you know, it was funny because back then, I mean, you know, all I wanted to do when I graduated from university was work for the Petes. And back then they were such small. I mean, there was only 2 or 3 people every team had. And that summer, the trainer for the Petes just decided to quit and go in another direction. So they needed somebody. And, you know, they knew me, and Dick Todd knew I wanted to get involved more. I'd scouted for them for 3 years. And so they offered me the job as a trainer. And back then you could do it. You can't do it now. I mean, you know, I wasn't qualified, but I spent a lot of time you know, learning how to sharpen skates, learning how to treat injuries. And anybody that doesn't know how to treat injuries, if there's an injury and you don't know what to do, put ice on it. That usually works. So, but I mean, back then, just to tell you how much it's changed, because back then our doctor that we had, he was really good. He taught me a lot, and, you know, I was taking stitches out of players, but he wanted me to learn how to start stitching. And so he said, you just do it right on the bench. Somebody gets hurt, you stitch them right there. I drew the line there. So, but it was one of the best things that, you know, at the time, I remember my parents were really disappointed because I had a degree, and here I am, you know, washing underwear. But I loved it. And just, but being around the team every day and being around players, I mean, the lessons I learned were invaluable. And I always find to this day, I can, when I was in Kingston or I was in Oshawa, you see players and you get a sense, whether they're upbeat or they're down, or, you kind of have a feel for how they think. So, and even though I was a trainer, I was still doing the bulk of the scouting too. So I was all over the place scouting, and you'd play on a Thursday night. I'd have to have everything done so that I could leave Friday morning to go to a tournament, and then, meet the team somewhere like, Kingston or something Friday night. So, but I never complained. It was just to be part of it was for me great. And obviously we had some success in Peterborough, and to be around such great players that we had come through there is, I was really fortunate. And, 30 years in one place. I mean, I was pretty bitter when I got fired there, but my wife's quick to remind me, I mean, in this business, when you can spend 30 years in one place, you're pretty fortunate. And my kids got to grow up here in Peterborough without moving around. So it was a long journey, Chris, but ultimately that was my goal. Like I said, I wanted to be a general manager. I wanted to be involved, but I wanted to learn from the bottom up, and I certainly did.
Thinking of that though, just listening to you tell that story, Jeff, from scouting as a university student when you're up at Laurentian and scouting for the Petes, and then getting that opportunity as a trainer, but you're still scouting. Look at how the game has evolved over the decades with all the specializations that now exist. A trainer is not just a trainer and washing the gear. These guys are highly trained medical staff, but then also you don't have scouts. You don't have trainers doing scouting anymore. Like, look at the way staffs, even in the Ontario Hockey League, have changed over these decades.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, back then we had in Peterborough, when I started, Dick Todd was the coach and general manager. We had a secretary. We had Jacques Martin, who's with the New York Rangers now. He was our assistant coach, but he taught part-time. So he only came in the afternoon, and me. So, I did press notes. I did the sold ads. I found billets. So when I did take over, I could basically tell people there's nothing that you guys are doing that I haven't done, and feel very fortunate to have been able to do that. But it's so much different now. The staff, I mean, I know in Peterborough now, they have 8 people full-time still on their business side, just on the business side. So, and the Kitchener, the Rangers are a much bigger organization. So the OHL, the teams now compared to when I started were vastly different. But the way they were back then obviously created an opportunity for me. So I was pretty fortunate, and everybody had to chip in and do everything, so like I said, selling ads, you name it. I did it there just to keep my job. And back then, they would pay me 2 weeks prior to the season starting and 2 weeks after the season ended. So then I would go and I worked for a swimming pool company, putting in pools for the first part of the summer. And then I worked every summer with Roger Neilson at the hockey school. Once that started, I left the swimming pool business and went into hockey school. So no complaints. I mean, like I said, I never complained. I just felt very fortunate to be able to do that.
When you started scouting, you were doing so without a car. Now, the majority of your scouting, you don't need a car because you're doing it over, watching games online and stuff. How difficult was it to scout and get your start in scouting when you couldn't even drive yourself?
Well, I'll give you an example, Chris. This was a typical night. So I was in Sudbury, and there was a tournament in Sault Ste. Marie. And I can still remember the player Dick Todd wanted me to go see was Tony Herkus from Thunder Bay. And so, I don't even know if they realized they didn't have a car. So I had to figure out how to get to the Sioux. So I figured out there's a bus schedule that left at, I think it left at like 11 o'clock or midnight, I think it was. And then I had a few stops on the way to the Sioux. So it got me in there about 6, I think. And then tournament started at 8, stayed there till 11 o'clock at night. The next bus went back to Sudbury. So it was 24 hours of, in between watching some games. But I tell that story all the time. And I never, it was never to me a big deal, because it was like, I just want to do this, and I want to be able to go and watch players. And even when I was in tier 2, I was living at home in high school. So I had to bum my dad's car or my mom's and go around all these little towns. But that's how you learn, and that's how you make contacts, I mean, this is not a game that you should do if you're not passionate about it. I mean, scouting, if you're doing it just so you can wear the jacket, then you shouldn't be doing it. But if you're passionate about it, and I love getting out to cities and meeting people and seeing kids play. And So that was a record though. That was a 24-hour marathon. I mean, it is what it is. But again, how lucky was I as a young guy that the Peterborough Petes would let me scout? Thankfully I had background in Tier 2, and I'd worked for Roger Neilson, every summer. So there was a connection there. But I always thought I was very fortunate.
You mentioned Roger Neilson's name. You also had mentioned Dick Todd and Jacques Martin, whose names are synonymous with hockey. Dick's particularly, of course, in the Ontario Hockey League. But focusing on Roger specifically, Captain Video, a lot of people say he was ahead of his time. And some of the things he did as a coach were really blazing trails for those that came after him. You working with him as near as you were to him in your younger years, what influence did he have on you?
Oh, he was huge, Mike. Roger was a huge influence on me. I learned the game from him. And, the style of play that the Petes played for years were all based on Roger. I mean, Roger was very influential on Dick Todd, very, very influential on me. The focus on defense. I mean, I never really understood defense, how to play it. I mean, angles and positioning and your stick and things. Just the smallest little details that Roger, you wouldn't even think of. And I had to do a lot of, because I had to set up all the video stuff for him for the hockey school. So I did all his clips and had to put them all together. So I saw all the stuff he had. And, but more than that, just as a person, Roger was just a very, very special person, and cared about people. And I'll give you an example. When I first got married, my wife thought that we should have Roger over for dinner we just bought a house. We had a little bungalow. And so, because everybody was always going to Roger's place, and my wife thought, yeah, we should have Roger over. So Roger and the dog come over, and he's looking around my house, and he says, where's your furniture? And I said, I don't have any. I got a bed, I got a kitchen table, and I got a little TV. That's all I got. And he says, wow, that won't do. I mean, Roger never swore, but his favorite thing was, well, what the crap? That's not good. So he says, I'll be back tomorrow. So the next day he pulls up with his truck and a trailer on the back, and he had a bunch of furniture from his house, and he basically furnished my house. So, and he, from a hockey perspective, the thing about Roger that I always stuck with me, and I helped him run his coaching clinic from day one too. Like we did it every year in Windsor, but Roger was the ultimate in sharing information. A lot of guys today, they'll hoard information. They don't want to share. Roger would share his information with anybody. Like anything you needed, he would share. And so I've kind of, adapted like his caring about people. I think that impacted me a lot. And the knowledge he shared with me and his willingness to share it, it's always stuck with me. So to this day, I still, there's young guys that reach out or they want to know, like, I don't have all the answers, but my knowledge, anything I have, I share, and that all comes from Roger. So just a tremendous person, and the most generous, kind person you'd ever meet. So very, very, very fortunate. I grew up around him, and a huge influence.
I read that you lived with Roger Neilson and Jacques Martin.
Well, when we first came to Peterborough, Chris, full time, well, Jacques Martin left Ottawa and left his family there and came to Peterborough as an assistant coach, and he was teaching, but him and I moved into Roger's place. So Roger had gone to start with the NHL, but Jacques and I lived there. So it was just these two guys. It was just my first year in Peterborough and his first full-time year too, but two guys just, we'd work all day, scout at night, talk hockey 24/7, and it was pretty good. But I always say about Jacques, I mean, he moved up a little quicker than me. I'm still kicking around, but Jacques got a couple Stanley Cups there in Pittsburgh. He's done really well. But I did spend a lot of time at Rogers. Like he had a great place on the lake, and when my kids were young, they'd love to go out there because he had a boat, he had a tennis court, everything that you'd want, he had. So but we spent a lot of hours out there, splicing back when you had the old videotapes you had to put together. So yes, I did live at his place, but Roger was gone. It was just Jacques and I. So it was good.
One of my favorite encounters with you over the years, Jeff, occurred in Peterborough at the arena. And before a game, you and I ran into each other in the concourse, or maybe I was near the Hall of Fame. Regardless, we went into the Hall of Fame the Sports Hall of Fame in the arena together. And you gave me a tour unlike I could have ever had on my own, because obviously as a Western Conference broadcaster, we get there one time a year. And I was just, doing the little tour, taking it all in. And you took me through that Hall of Fame. And I could tell your pride and your passion for the Pete's organization, for the city of Peterborough. I've never forgotten, and I loved it. And one of the things that stood out from that tour, not only was I almost late for broadcast because we got talking so much, but you pointed out to me, and I don't think a lot of people know this, Wayne Gretzky in the Ontario Hockey League is synonymous with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, and we all know what he did there. But his first point was actually recorded as a Peterborough Pete. How did that come to pass? 3 games with the Petes.
Yeah, well, it's a great story, and I actually saw one of the games. I remember going to a game. I saw him with the Petes, but he was playing on a junior B team, the Seneca Nationals, and the Petes were affiliated with them, and it was his draft year. So because they were affiliated, they could bring players up. So Wayne got brought up to the Petes and played the 3 games. And Mike, I don't know, I think you're missing the key trivia thing there that I told you. It's the only team he never scored a goal for. Played 3 games, he had 3 points, 3 assists, but no goals, right? So, and the great
what
story.
A schlum.
There's a great story about Wayne Gretzky, and this was before my time, but there was a guy by the name of Paul Goulet, was a longtime head scout of the Petes, who was from Brantford. He was very good friends with Walter Gretzky, and the plan was that Wayne, he knew the Petes through Paul Goulet, the head scout, and the only team he really wanted to go to in the draft was Peterborough, apparently. And the Sioux stepped up and took him, but he very easily could have been a Pete for more than just the 3 games that he played. But I do. There is a lot of passion, Mike, for, and I have no connection with the Petes anymore. I don't, there's no connection there. But just the history. It's still, when I go in there and I think of the history and the players that came through there, and I still go through that Hall of Fame regularly because so many great players came here, and I know the history. I know what went on here and before me during my time here, and I there is a lot of pride for sure. And I had a short sleeve shirt on. I can show you. I got a Pete's tattoo on my arm, so that tells you that even though there's no connection there anymore, I am a Pete, and will always be proud of the guys that came through here.
How awkward was that tattoo when you went to Oshawa?
It was really awkward, Chris. When I went to Oshawa, it was funny because they had a press conference, and I was telling the story to somebody. But Brian Boyes, the trainer, he's the best trainer in hockey, I think. And he gave me a bag with a bunch of stuff, gear to wear and stuff. First time I put on a General's jacket, I was like, it was funny because I was like, I didn't think this would, it was weird, like, because if you go back to the early 80s and that rivalry, unless you lived through it, you don't understand how intense it was. And I use the word hatred. It's probably a strong word, but back then it was hatred. We hated the Generals. They hated us. When we went into Oshawa, the bus was silent from the time we left Peterborough. When they came into our building, it was sold out. And I used to tell players all the time, we'd play exhibition games against Oshawa early in the early 80s. I used to tell the players, if you can't play here in Oshawa, then you can't play on this team. I just tell you, because this is serious. And so the tattoo never got a lot of notoriety there. I don't wear a lot of short sleeve shirts or anything, but just wearing the jacket was weird. But it was a great couple years. I loved it there. The fans were great. It's a great city. I never really knew. I mean, I just go in there to games and leave. And I'll also put it in perspective. My wife loves the Oshawa Center, which is a big shopping mall. And during my time in Peterborough, I did everything I could to discourage her, don't shop there. You don't spend a cent in Oshawa. But when I got there, and you start to realize the city and the fans are passionate, it's a great place. The building's great, obviously, but fans are passionate. They love the Generals, and they're longtime fans. They know the history. So they embraced me a lot more than I thought they would. And I think one of the reasons was I bought a place, a little condo right downtown, and they were amazed that, why wouldn't you just commute? And I said, no, I'm all in here. So I seemed to win them over fairly quickly there. We had a couple of good years there. So again, long-winded answer. I apologize, but I'll never apologize for the tattoo. I'm a Pete through and through.
Isn't it interesting that the '06 championship team in Peterborough wouldn't have thought of it at the time, but for the longest time in the Ontario Hockey League stood out because it was an Eastern Conference team that had won not just an OHL championship, but obviously the Memorial Cup. But the OHL championship was an aberration because the Western Conference was winning them all until 2015 rolled around, and oh, lo and behold, there were the Oshawa Generals. But going back to that '06 team, what are your memories from that season, Jeff? And obviously, I mean, so much I could throw in, but I was an outsider, obviously, just watching. You were in it. What did it mean? What was that season like?
You know, it was a great year, Mike, and I think that it's historically it's the best season in the history of the franchise. You know, the record and the winning percentage and all that stuff. But it was special because 2 or 3 years prior to that, we missed the playoffs. And it was the first time in the history of the first time in 28 years that we missed the playoffs. And that, for a variety of reasons, but a couple of them were Eric Staal was in the NHL. They were renovating the arena. We had to play 12 straight on the road. And we took a lot of heat locally, and myself in particular. And we stuck with that core group. And that's a key to winning. You got to develop a core, and then you complement it at the end. But that core, guys like Jamie Tardif, Trevor Hendricks, guys like that have been around, have been through the tough times. That was really special. And it was the first time really, that I remember the night we won, it was 4 straight against London too, which, I mean, to beat London 4 straight anytime is pretty special. But I remember, I just stood on the boards. I said, I'm not even going to run out, and I'm just going to stand there. I'm just going to take it in, because the more you're around it, the more you realize how hard it is, and how, it might be your last time. And so I just stood there. I remember, and actually the first guy that grabbed me to drag me in after was Steve Downey, but former Ranger, but just taking it in, and I still have that memory of just watching the guys and what they had been through. And it's a funny story too, and I'll if you guys got time, I'll tell you. But that year we missed the playoffs. It was, like I said, first time in 28 years. They want to hang me downtown Peterborough. But one of the things I said to the team, I brought them in at the end. I said, listen, like we missed the playoffs here, but this is, it's shitty, it's crappy, but this is an opportunity. So I said, we're going to have our own playoffs, and I'm going to make it optional, obviously. But the next 2 weeks, we're going to dig in here. We're going to get a head start on our conditioning. We're going to get a head start on some development stuff. We're going to do some things, but you got to be all in. And if anybody's late, you miss anything, then you're out. And we're going to have some fun. I'm going to take you to, I took them down to some Marley game, tour of the Air Canada Centre, Hockey Hall of Fame, had a nice dinner for them at the end. But in the middle, it was a lot of hard work. We were running 5 miles outside, and I remember in the snow, and it was still, it was cold. And so part of winning, I believe, is that you got to go through some trauma. And that team went through a lot of trauma, not just from missing the playoffs, but those kids all stayed for an extra 2 weeks and dug in and took advantage of it, instead of just saying, okay, let's just get out of here. It's like, no. And we brought in speakers. We did a lot with that group. And then to finally see them win the OHL championship 4 straight. I mean, that team, we never lost a game in the playoffs at home. Never lost an overtime game. I think after the second round, we never lost a game. So, but it all goes back to the roots of missing the playoffs, and then what we did with it. So pretty special, and pretty proud of that group. But it took some trauma to get us there.
Any team that goes into Peterborough knows that rink gives you guys a bit of home ice advantage. You had a player during your career that also helped that when you opened the door and let him out for 40 minutes at a time in Chris Pronger. You say that you helped get him ready for the amount of ice time he played in the NHL by just letting him out for 40. When you remember him coming in with that big mullet, did he ever give you a hard time about your mustache?
He gave me a hard time about a lot of things, Chris. I still get a lot of grief over that mustache. It was in style back then. And but you know what, Chris was, and I'm pretty close with Chris to this day. But I still remember. I mean, he was 6'5" and he had the mullet and just string bean. And we knew he was good. I remember first seeing him, and we played high school in Dryden, and then we played junior B in Stratford, and just watched him. We knew he was good, but when you had him on the ice, you know, I was coaching, and I coached the defense, so he made me look pretty smart. But you know, just to watch what he did and his passion. He was first guy on the ice every day. He would sit with me on the bus and never shut up. I remember one night from Sudbury to Peterborough, asking questions, you know, talking hockey, asking questions. So, you know, when he went second overall, like, did I know he was going to be a Hall of Famer? Maybe not, but did I know he's going to be like a special player? Oh yeah, he's pretty, and he's so mean. Like, he was competitive and driven, and so yeah, he learned to play 40 minutes under me for sure.
Sorry, Mike, you mentioned real quick, you mentioned the scariness on the ice. I think that's what a lot of people recognize when they say Chris Pronger, but you talk about it. A lot of people behind the scenes call him a really funny guy. Was there a switch that flipped with him when the door opened?
Oh yeah. And he keeps his circle pretty tight, but if you're in that, you see like the sense of humor he has. He's really funny. And he's a really, like, he's got a lot of energy. I mean, when he came to us, his car had a license plate on it. There was a truck, I think he had Chaos 6. That was his. So, but a kind guy. Like, he, you know, when he went into the Hall of Fame, I mean, he had my wife and I there for the whole thing. We sat about 4 rows from the front, and it's a limited amount of people they let into that thing. When he won the Stanley Cup, brought me out to Anaheim, you know, to celebrate with it. A lot of guys do that. So I don't think it's unique to Chris, but just shows that there's a side to him that, you know, he doesn't forget. If he's the type of guy as busy as he is now, if I fired him off a text, he'd get back to me in, you know, within an hour or so. So really, really good guy. And, but that competitiveness and that drive, that never changed.
So many names, Jeff, and you know, we talked about the Stahls earlier. We talked about lots of coaches. Obviously, you mentioned Steve Downey, who was a guy that was a lot like we're talking about with Chris Pronger. I think different levels, I understand, but a terror on the ice, but a much different guy off the ice from certainly the guy I got to know for his brief time in Kitchener, Pronger, etc. I know it's kind of like asking about a favorite child, but is there a player or players over your years that have really stood out to you for any reason?
Well, you know, there's a lot of them, obviously, Mike, and you risk, you know, missing somebody. But kind of the one off the top of my head was Eric Staal. I mean, you know, we drafted Eric 13th overall that year, and a lot of people laughed at us. And, you know, I can't sit here and honestly say I knew he was going to be that good. But the night before the draft, Norm Robert, who was our head scout at the time, really liked Eric, and I liked him. And, you know, we were debating, him and I shared a room at the hotel. I think the draft, I don't know where the draft, I think it was in Toronto that year. But so anyways, we're sitting and, you know, we're back and forth. And I remember saying to Norm, I said, you know what, it's midnight. I said, I got to phone his coach. So I phoned the coach to Thunder Bay Bantams at the time to tell him who I am. And he confirmed to me, he's like, yeah, he's a good player, you know. And I said, well, I'm thinking about taking him in the first round. And he goes, what? First round? Like, no. So I hung the phone up. I said to Norm, well, that didn't help. So anyways, we took him, and you know, I remember getting up to announce it, and there was another team right by the podium there, and somebody yelled out, no way. So they laughed at us, and when you first saw Eric, he was just a scrawny little kid. And again, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this is a pretty good story about Eric. And he was so shy when he came. We did a fitness test about a week after we drafted him. Couldn't get a word out of him, and his mother was with him. And so on the Sunday, I was going to take him out for breakfast and then take him to Toronto to fly him back to Thunder Bay. And Eric, his normal kind of, you know, very shy little kid sitting there, wouldn't say anything. And his mother, Linda, as part of the conversation, just happened to say to me, she's like, you know, Jeff, I'm really lucky. I've got 4 boys, and they're all good kids, you know. And she said, I think it's because of this rink that we built, my husband built. We live on a farm and there's nothing else to do, so we built them a rink. And Eric sat up in his chair, and the light went on, and he started talking about this rink to me. And then he was like, you know, Mr. Twohey, my dad puts boards up, he hangs lights, you know, we got a water truck so we can I can skate whenever I want. And I remember, you know, I said to my wife after, I said, I don't know how good he's going to be, but he's a player. You know, just, you could see the passion. And I never forgot that about Eric. And we didn't know he was going to grow. I mean, when we drafted him, he was 5'11", 142 pounds. When we left us, he was probably 6'3", 190 or something. So that's a special one. The other one, Mike, that really, and Chris, that I found was really rewarding was Sean Thornton. Thornton had gone through 2 drafts and got cut from every junior B team in the Oshawa area. And it's a funny story, but I was at a tournament in Gatineau, Quebec, and everybody left because they thought, it was pretty well over. But I wanted to see, I think it was a Thunder Bay team or somebody played the very last game of the night. So I had to sit through about 3 games of crap. There was nothing, and everybody left. And in the last game that I was watching before Thunder Bay, Oshawa major midgets were playing. And they were getting beat by this team from Montreal, and I'm falling asleep there. And halfway through the game, somebody ran the Oshawa goalie and then challenged the bench. And this kid jumped off the bench and grabbed the guy and, gave it to him. And there was a lady, it's just fate, but there was a lady sitting beside me, and she was right into the fight, and I looked at her and I said, oh, the kid looks like he knows what he's doing. And she looked at me and she says, he's never been beat. So I said, oh, you know that kid? That's my boy, she said. So went to the draft. I put him on the draft list, and I said to the scouts, I go, listen, I don't know. I saw this guy play, and I know he's a tough kid. So 9th round, I'm just going to take him, but he won't even be here. So I went up, announced Peterborough Pete select Sean Thornton. Go sit down, boom, right beside me, there's this kid. And I said, who are you? And he goes, I'm Sean Thornton. I said, well, what do you do? I didn't ever talk to the kid or anything. He says, I only came because my friends were getting drafted. So we took him, and so the kid, Sean went from, couldn't make a junior B team or anything around Oshawa. He got cut everywhere. He was playing major midget, made our team in 96 that were OHL champions, and it's gone on, 2 Stanley Cups. He's one of the chief operating officers now for the Florida Panthers. So that's one where you get lucky. I mean, again, you could sit here and say, well, I watched him play. I knew, I got lucky. I just happened to be sitting there and took advantage of an opportunity. And then, Sean made the most of it. But those kids like that that's pretty rewarding.
I'm going to bounce around generations and go back to the early 80s. Mike already asked you about Wayne Gretzky, but I'm going to ask you about the greatest player to ever play the game of hockey.
Stop it already.
Mike and I get in this argument every time we go to Peterborough because Steve Yzerman was once a Peterborough Pete in your early days. Do you have any memories of the greatest player, Steve Yzerman, or the teams he was on?
Chris, I always say that my very first draft with the Petes, we took Steve Yzerman. So, it sounds like I had something to do with it, which I didn't, because I was in university at the time. That was a Jacques Martin pick, but I remember Steve coming down to the table, and he had the long hair, and Dave Dryden was the coach at the time. And I remember Dave just said to him, get your hair cut, and from that point on, I don't think there was a great relationship between Steve and Dave Dryden. And unfortunately, Dave got fired about halfway through that year, and Dick Todd took over, and that's when Steve really took off. And Dick was really good with, he understood players and gave Steve the opportunity. And he, just so Chris, I'll give you a trivia. Do you remember what number he started with in Peterborough?
6.
No, I believe it was 8. He started with 8, and then he got his iconic 19. But do you realize too, I believe that the year that he got drafted by the Petes, I think he led the Central Junior League in scoring as a 15-year-old. So he's obviously very special leader, like the qualities he brought to Detroit. When you hear people talk about him and the work ethic, the toughness, the commitment, and they questioned him early in his career whether he, was suitable there to be a captain. But Steve's gone on to be pretty good. So he's right up there. He is one of the best. So I'm not going to argue with you on that one.
I had to fanboy a little.
Yep, nothing wrong with that.
I knew it was going to happen, and there's nothing wrong with that. I want to jump back to what you were just talking about with Sean Thornton and goalie getting run and a player challenging the bench. And I'm thinking back, Jeff, because on one of our recent episodes of this podcast, we talked to Graham Bonner, who has a great story with his overcoming addiction, most notably, but of course played in the mid-'80s up in Sault Ste. Marie. And one of the stories we got into was when the Greyhounds were in Hamilton when the Steelhawks were still
Oh, yeah,
around.
I remember that game.
Yeah, it's a game of the week, the OHL game of the week. And what happens before the game even starts? Well, there's a Donnybrook, right?
Yeah,
And
Bill LaForge.
exactly. Bill LaForge with Hamilton, Crispy up in Sault Ste. Marie.
Yeah.
Bookaboom would be on the ice then. I mean, just
Robert, maybe.
absolutely. It was a different game. This was the game that I grew up watching in the Ontario Hockey League. And look, I get it. We understand. We all understand where we are at with player safety, with health, with life beyond the game. But there was something about that era, Jeff, and we look at where the game is at now. How fond are your memories of what the game used to be like, and how much of it might we be missing still in today's game?
Well, you're definitely missing something, Mike. But just to go back a little bit, Graham Bonner played for the Petes, and Graham still to this day is a very good close friend of mine. But I'll tell you a quick Graham Bonner story. So we were going into Belleville one night just after we got him in a trade, and he said to me before the game, "Who's in net tonight for Belleville?" And I said, "I think it's Mike Bishop was his name." And he looked at me, and goes, "Well, that's good. I'll get 4 tonight." And game's over. He had 4 with his last one coming from center. And I remember saying, "How did you?" He goes, he played in London. He said, "I own that guy." So Graham Bonner, one of the best pure goal scorers that I ever saw. But getting back to your question, Mike, it's different now because what the fans miss, like for instance, when we used to play Oshawa or Belleville, there was a buzz in the city because those games were tough and they weren't for the faint of heart. Now, having said that, I don't like stupidity either, but and guys back then had memories. They didn't forget. Like and the teams, it's a little bit like the NHL used to be in that they didn't communicate with each other. Like, not like they do now. They're all friends. They all play, like it was a different time. And you really miss that buzz. Like I said, Oshawa coming into Peterborough on a Thursday night, whole day, even me getting ready for it, I was nervous, and just that intensity and we use the word hatred, but there was respect. I mean, we respected the Generals, but we did not like them, and they did not like us. And so that intensity that used to be there, it takes away from the game. Having said that, the skill and the speed of the game now makes it really entertaining. And to see special players like, when Connor McDavid was playing junior, players like that, I mean, you get a chance to see them in junior. It's a different game, but you do miss the intensity, or I do. And, the physical part of it, not necessarily the fighting, I mean, but just the hard physicality of it. And, like now you can't even, chirp, you can't, like Ty Domi, he couldn't go 5 minutes without threatening somebody. So now for him it'd be a tough time. But the characters, there was characters back then too, like that, like a Ty, or every team had them. And so again, long-winded answer, but I miss that part of it. I really miss the rivalries, the intensity, the fierce dislike between teams. And that's never going to come back the way the game is now. But having said that, again, watching these skilled players now, it's a treat.
You mentioned those skilled players through the years in the OHL. You've seen plenty of them, from the Stahls we've talked about, Yzerman, all the way through Lindros, McDavid, and most recently Shane Wright. If someone were to ask you who is the most dominant OHL player you've ever seen, your answer would be
Eric Lindros.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why, Chris. We played him 1 year 10 times, and this was before overtime. Our record was 0-9-1. And we'd be close sometimes. We'd be like, "Oh, I think he's sleeping tonight, so we might be close." He'd just wake up in the third, and like, he was so physically dominant, and he was mean. Like, he didn't, like, we had you probably don't remember, a defenseman, Jamie Pegg, was a really, back in the day, unique because he was small, but he was a puck mover, run the power play, really skilled. And we used to worry for him because Lindros, he didn't care. Like, he would kill him if he got a chance. So not only in ability wise, but just like mean, competitive, and he was the most dominant I ever saw. We just couldn't, like I said, we're 0-9-1. Like, try living with that for a year against Oshawa.
You talked earlier about Chris Pronger and still staying in touch to the point there where if you sent him a text now, he'd get back to you. Graham Bonner remains a friend.
Yeah.
We know that the game is kind of small in some ways. Once you get into that circle, you see the same faces, you stay in touch with people. To this day, Jeff, is that what it's really all about for you, the relationships that were built and that you maintain to this day?
Yeah, 100%, and that's all you really get out of it is relationships and memories. I mean, certainly, back when I started, you weren't getting rich doing it. Not like these guys are now. They make good for them. But it's the relationships, it's the friendships, and I'm sure you guys see it. You see somebody that you haven't seen for 20 years, and it's like you just go right back to junior. I mean, I was with the Coyotes. I was in Cape Breton one night, and a guy says, "Hey, Jeff." I looked and I said, "Jesus, John Hanna." John Hanna played for us for half a year with the Petes. He's on the board of directors for the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles now. So just run into him in Cape Breton. It's like we were never apart, and so yeah, I treasure those. But it is about relationships and friendships. And Graham Bonner is a prime example. Like him and I talk a lot about a lot of different things, and he's been through a lot, but just a really good person. And it's real easy to be friends with the Chris Prongers or guys that are in the NHL, like that we have relationships with. But the other guys that are teachers or like John Hanna is a teacher, but he's on the board of directors for Cape Breton. All these guys, like it just the memories are great because we went through a lot. Like we won championships, and so I treasure those to this day for sure.
Having the ability to be a scout in the OHL and then move up to be a GM, and then you become a scout in the National Hockey League. What are some of those memories from the war room, if you will, at the draft, or you in an occasion where you're trying to pitch your general manager, I like this guy, or on the reverse when you're the GM and you have two scouts saying, you got to take this guy, and the other guy's going, no, you got to take this guy?
Yeah, it's tough when you're in junior and you've got guys, you got to kind of arbitrate, and inevitably you're going to hurt somebody's feelings because somebody's player's going higher than the others. But, again, my time in Arizona, the best times there were with Don Maloney. Again, an ex-Kitchener Ranger, someone that I grew up around. Don liked debate, and I don't think we ever got to the point of, the debates were never personal. As the group grew in Arizona, we had this small group there. Don left, John Chaika came in, but it was the same group. And as the group kind of grew, one of the great things, Chris, was that we had some really spirited fights. Like we would argue, like the F-bombs were flying, but then as soon as it was over, we'd go out and have a couple beers. And it was a mutual respect among that staff. And unfortunately, the Coyotes cleared everybody out. And then they got into all their cheating scandal and all that other stuff they did. But we had a really good group there. And the great thing about that group, Chris, was that the whole passion was just to get the best player. Like it wasn't about getting my player or your player. It was just, let's just get the best, So we had some real spirited arguments there with that crew. I learned a lot too. Don Maloney as a leader he's a tremendous person. I don't know how well you guys know him, but he was the captain of the Rangers, Kitchener Rangers, captain of the New York Rangers, but just a solid person that cares about people, listens to you. I remember Don would call me the odd time when I was with the Coyotes and say, like, I haven't talked to you, like, why don't you call me? And I'm like, well, I don't really want to bother you. I figure you got better things to do, then you don't need me calling you, but he would check in and just a really good person. So, and then, sitting at the war room or sitting at the table, I'll tell you kind of a funny story, but like we had a first round pick, I don't know what, 3 or 4 years ago. It was the second last or the last pick in the first round. And so the way it works at the table is you've got a hockey operations guy's got a computer there, and he can tell you, like before the pick's made or announced, you can kind of tell who's been taken. And we really wanted this defenseman, wanted him really bad. And so we asked the hockey ops guy, is his name still in the pool? And he goes, yeah, he's still in there. So I remember I was sitting right beside Don, and Don pounded. He's like, yes, finally, we're getting some good luck. We're getting our guy. Like, yes. And we're all like, yes. Columbus go up, and they go, Columbus Blue Jackets draft the exact player we thought we were getting. we looked at that hockey ops guy. He's like, I don't know. His name's still there. I don't know. So anyways, there's always some humor there too, but it's high stakes, obviously, at that level. And, you're moving up, you're trading down. You've got to know the draft. You've got to understand it. And we did a lot of that, trade down, gain picks, and still get guys that we wanted. So I miss that part of it. But I obviously couldn't stay there in Arizona after the changes they made. So wish them well.
You talk about high stakes, and it just makes me think, again, a guy that's been in the game as long as you have, and obviously the decades with the Petes stand out for you, but you've bounced to other teams, Oshawa, Kingston, NHL with the Arizona Coyotes. Do you thrive on the pressure, Jeff? Because it's famously said in this game, right, that coaches are hired to be fired.
Yep.
I mean, and it's all about production. Show me the results, or we'll show you the door. Do you need to thrive on that pressure to survive in this game so long?
Yeah, you do. You have to accept it. I got better at it. I mean, when I got fired in Peterborough, it was devastating. I didn't, I thought that only happened to other people. But, the great thing about it, Mike and Chris, is that it was good for me. And I learned from that, I could survive it. I can survive being fired. I'm not afraid of it. I think my last year in Peterborough, there was a lot going on behind the scenes, and a little bit of a power struggle there, and just it really wore on me. And I can remember my first year in Arizona. I was in Ottawa and I was staying over, and I met my daughter for lunch because she was going to school there, and it was maybe October. And she looked at me and she said, like, do you like working for Arizona? And I said, yeah, it's good. Nobody bothers me. I was kind of beat up at the end there in Peterborough. I said, why do you ask? And she said, well, you look so much better now, like, than you did like near the end there in Peterborough. So I think I let it get to me a little bit near the end in Peterborough because I knew I can read what's going on behind the scenes. But having recovered from that, it's an awful thing to say, but if you're going to be in this business, everybody should get fired once, because you learn. Like I learned, I got better. And again, I learned I can handle it. Like if it happens, I can deal with it, so it made me better. But you have to accept the pressure. You have to understand that, you're not there to be average. Ultimately your goal is to win. And thankfully we won 4 times in Peterborough over the years, 4 championships. Thankfully, I mean, it was a lot of hard work, but if you don't have a bit of that on your resume, it's tough. So that comes with the territory. And, young guys that are into it now, they've never been fired. I'm sure they'll be like me and take it hard, but hopefully they learn. That's how you get better. Adversity makes you stronger. So I wouldn't wish what I went through and losing my job in Peterborough on anybody, but when you look back on it again, yeah, that was probably a good thing for me developmentally.
You mentioned that nowadays teams have, like 8 guys on their office staff, or back in the day, it might not have been that many with you, which a lot of the responsibility then falls to the general manager and doing the scouting and when you were behind the bench and so on. How difficult was that with a young family at home?
It was hard. I had 2 girls, and, it's funny, Chris, I was very fortunate. You look back and you go, geez, I missed a lot of stuff, and I remember one time we were sitting out in the back by the pool, and my oldest daughter, we were just talking about it. I said, I got some regrets because I missed, a lot. And I said, but, I was trying to survive, and she looked at me and she said, yeah, but you were always there when we needed you. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good, so it is difficult. And, as I said at the start, or hard to tell you guys, like she's here temporarily with us. Our husband's been transferred, but so she's got her 2-year-old here, and I treasure every minute with him. And keep this on the down low, but I actually took him. We got him in gymnastics, and I was singing Humpty Dumpty with him the other day. So, but I mean, that's, again, you learn, right? You learn the importance of your family, but it was hard. I missed a lot, and I was lucky I had a wife that understood it, and kids that didn't really know any different, but look back on it and said, yeah, but you were there when we needed you. So I'm very fortunate.
Gymnastics, that's good for the balance, when he puts on a pair of skates.
I got it. Yeah, well, that's the start. I'll tell you, the other day I had him out, and there was a girl down the street playing lacrosse, and she was throwing a lacrosse ball against the house, and my little grandson, he stopped and he was staring at it, and he wouldn't move for like 10 minutes. I'm like, all right, let's go, man. We got to move. We're going to the park. So he walked a few steps, and there was a like a stick on the road, and he picked that thing up, and he was holding it with two hands, like he was, so like, maybe we'll have something there. so anyways, yeah, we'll get him into skating. He's going to skate. I really believe every kid should play sports, and I don't care if he's any good at it. I told my daughter, if he played house league hockey and loved it, I'd be happy. If he loved it and got good at it and did something with it, that great. But you gotta whatever sport he wants to play, if he likes it, whether he's good at it or not, all that matters is he likes it. So,
Hey, lacrosse, that fits right in up there anyway, right?
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Jeff, we like to do a thing called the Fast Five as we wrap these things up. So it can be from the mundane to the philosophical. Okay, so whatever comes to mind. You ready?
Yep.
Okay, starting with the mundane. Cats or dogs?
Dogs, 100%.
Thank goodness. I knew there was a reason we got along.
No time for cats.
Okay, when it comes to French fries, ketchup or gravy?
Ketchup. Don't eat gravy.
That always reminds me of Owen Sound. So this ties into the next question, because Don Cameron always said when you're in Owen Sound, they got the best fries in the league. We always would get a bucket, and Chris and I still do that before an Attack Rangers game. So in connection to that, any media room anywhere, and I know in your earliest days there wouldn't have been food served at a rink, but where can you get the best food, or where have you ever had the best media room food?
You guys are asking me. You've been to Saginaw, right? But before Saginaw, where it used to be was Plymouth. Like in the day, well, you probably remember, Mike, like they used to have the full meals there, but you can't beat Saginaw. Like you can just go in there and gorge. I mean, with the pizza, the donuts, everything in there, they do a great job there.
I loved it in Plymouth with the pop vending machine, but you didn't have to put the money in. It was like magic. You push the button, out it came.
Do you remember the fresh cookies they used to have there? They were still warm when they put them out.
So good.
Only
so
in Plymouth.
Okay, what rink did you step into, Jeff, when you looked around and said, okay, I'm in a barn? We use barn a lot when we're talking about arenas. What one were you in where you're like, okay, this is a barn?
In Ontario or anywhere?
Anywhere.
Well, in the Quebec League, remember there used to be a team in Beauport, the Beauport Harfangs they were called. And I went in there one time to scout I don't know why I was there, but I was like, wow, this is a Quebec League arena. So that one was a tough one to go into. Some of those other ones up in Rouen and places like that, they're old, but they got a lot of history. They're nice. But I just remember Beauport. That's a bad rink. They don't have a team there anymore, and for good reason.
Okay, last one. We know that you've got the Pete's tattoo, and obviously that is your team where your allegiance is in the Ontario Hockey League. What about the NHL? Who's got your heart?
I've always been a Montreal Canadiens fan. Grew up, and you know what? And secondary, there's a secondary team too, is New York Rangers, and that all goes back to Dave and Don Maloney. But you can't beat the history of the Canadiens. I mean, you just can't. It's too special. And we actually played a game in there. Remember, we used to have the interleague play. And we had to play, was it Laval? I think it was Laval. They were the Laval Rocket, I think they were called, or whatever they were called. But they played out of the Bell Center. And we had to go in there and play them one night. I won't keep you, but get this schedule. Play at home Saturday, Sunday afternoon in Montreal. and people wondered why I was so opposed to those interleague games. It was just stupid, I thought. But it was kind of neat to play in there. It was about 8,000. So that was cool. Just like, and the other one on that note, Mike and Chris, you probably remember going into Joe Louis when the junior wings were there, and you get 15,000 in there for a junior game. So those were special. And I'll get one last one. I'll tell you the last one, one of the biggest thrills I ever had, because I'm a music fan. We played the old Detroit Ambassadors in Cobo Hall in Detroit.
Oh, wow.
So we went in there their first year, and everybody was kind of looking at the rink, and I'm like, my all-time favorite album is Bob Seger, Live Bullet, recorded live at Cobo Hall. So I'm like, this is where Bob Seger recorded Live Bullet. No thoughts of the game at all. I was just thinking, but we were in Cobo Hall to play the Ambassadors back then. So that was a special rink too.
I was going to add a quick one there, Mike, about you don't have to, or if you follow Jeff on Twitter, you know he's a huge music fan.
Yeah.
I was going to put him on the spot. He may have just leaked it. But if you were to give us, let's say, your top 3 bands or performers of all time,
Well, you got to start with the Rolling Stones, right?
Okay.
Like, I've never seen them, but to be able to see them at some point would have been, or would be, really special. After that, I've seen Kid Rock 3 or 4 times. I mean, he's not an iconic like the Stones, but you ever want to see a good concert? I mean, he's really good. And another one that I've seen and I got really excited, my wife thought I was like a little schoolgirl, giddy little schoolgirl to see them, was Bad Company. So those aren't all like high end, but you start with the Stones just to be able to see those guys. And like I said, Kid Rock, great performer, and I just love Bad Company and their music and the history there too. So anyways, there you go. There's 3 quick ones for you, Chris.
I like it.
It's too bad. See, I'm trying to keep it fresh. Just with Graham Bonner, asked him about music, and it came out Lynyrd Skynyrd and Black Sabbath. So I knew you loved the music, but I thought, well, I'm going to get something different from Jeff this time.
Well, I'll tell you about Graham Bonner. I saw Ozzy Osbourne. That's maybe the best concert I've ever seen. But Graham, we met before the concert. He was in the second row. And from the stage, I was way at the back with my daughter. He's sending me pictures from, yeah. So nobody's a bigger fan. He's seen Ozzy Osbourne probably, I think he told me like 15 times or something. So anyways, that was another great concert. So
okay, I promise this is going to be the last thing. But when you talked about playing in Peterborough on a Saturday, into Montreal for that interleague game on a Sunday afternoon, and you're talking about some of those barns in the queue, it just makes me think quickly, but Cornwall, do we need them back in the league or what?
They should be.
I think so too.
I've said, Mike, ever since they left, like they had an owner there that caused that team to leave. And no disrespect to Sarnia, I mean, that's a great franchise, but the Cornwall Royals with 2 Memorial Cups and the history there, 100% they should be back in the league. I'll always support that. I'm a big fan of the Royals and the history, and that building still, that building's with some modifications would still work, I think. So I'm with you on that one. Bring back the Royals and great jerseys.
Absolutely. We're going to get you back on. It'll be the Cornwall Royals reunion is what we're going to do.
Anytime. I'd look forward to it.
A yes for the Royals from Pete's Royalty.
Hey, that's being a little, that's generous, but I'll take it. Thanks, Chris.
That's why they pay him the big bucks, Jeff. This was great. Thanks so much for doing it.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot for having me on. I love talking hockey, as you can tell, and I ramble on, but thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.